Thank you very much. I'm going to just say a few words. It's been 10 years ago, I asked before, when I spoke last time to the union, 10 years ago. Most of you, I was going to say, weren't born yet. That's wrong, but you weren't certainly studying. I just made London my first home. So many things have happened in 10 years, and I'm not going to start about Brexit. In my personal and private life, so I'm happy to be back. I'm still involved in tennis. I'm still, as you said, running the German Federation. I'm still, they call me an expert in tennis, so I still commentate Djokovic and the Nadal and the Federer. So, and how we're going to do this is usually the best for you and me, is that once we sit down and we have a conversation, it's more interactive if you come up with questions. Sometimes I stand up and I talk to you directly, whoever asked me the question. Just feel free and comfortable the way that I usually do. So let's have a good hour, yeah? Or how long we want to speak for.
Wonderful. So my first question was that before you'd won Wimbledon, age 17, when did you decide and when did you know that tennis was a career that you wanted to devote your time to?
Yeah, this is a good opening question. You must understand, 1985 you're talking about, there was no internet, there was no mobile phones. Imagine life without it. We had to talk to one another. How difficult is that? We had to read the newspapers, right? You maybe fax one another, but you couldn't send quickly an email or you know, how everybody's talking about nowadays. So it was very difficult in the early 80s to convince anybody, let alone my parents, to become a professional sportsman. You know, yes, we had football then, but the average salary of a football player was nowhere close to what it is now. So, you know, explaining my parents that I like tennis, it was an impossibility. But thankfully, I was pretty good already at 12, 13, 14, and I had, you know, coaches come, and I had, you know, important international managers come to visit my parents, and you know, convince my father that, you know, it's a good thing to give this young lad a chance, and it was a difficult time because obviously, you know, and I'm a father of 4 children, to sooner or later convince yourself that even an 18 and 19-year-old knows what they're doing. You know, with mine, I'm convinced they're not. And so it was impossible for my parents to think that a 16-year-old back in the day in 1984 would know what he was doing. But one thing led to another. The most difficult thing was, because I was at a proper school as well, to convince the school principal to give me a 2-year leave of absence, because that's what it was, in case you break your leg or you're not successful, you don't like anymore what you're doing. So the funny part was, in my very first year, I won Wimbledon. So, you know, big surprise, but I had to come back to the interview to the principal because he said, you might want to come back. Now, what he missed, he either doesn't like sport or tennis, or he missed the fact there were 10,000 fans outside the school wanting an autograph, but it was oblivious to him. So after a 45-minute interview with him in the summer of 1985, I just managed to say this. At the moment, things are going very well. I won a little tournament up north in England. Give me another year chance. Maybe I'm going to be good one day. That was really my parting words. The good thing for him, though, is that because I won it again the following year, he didn't ask me for a follow-up interview. I think he got the message by then. So that was the good news. But no, if I would ask, if my children would have asked me at 16, 17, can we skip school, or can we, you know, try our luck in anything else? Of course I would say no. So looking back, it's still a brave decision, you know, of my parents to trust, you know, my talent and my confidence, and that I felt like I was going to do something good, to let me go, because usually it doesn't work. You know, you have, I don't know about football, but you have thousands of tennis players that are trying to make it, trying to win a major, trying to break into the top 50 or in the top 100. 99% of these players won't make it. You know, of course we only talk about Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, but about the other 10,000 that didn't make it, we don't talk about it. So it's a risky decision, it's a risky choice, and you know, the majority of my decision would always be, you know, stick with it, finish your university, learn something decent, don't become a sportsman.
So is that what motivated you through your early part of the career, the risk that you'd taken? and wanting to prove that you made the right choice?
Well, very much so. First of all, any teenager likes their freedom, right? So it was great to not to live at home anymore, and I was moving to Monte Carlo at 16 in my own flat, imagine. It was a small flat in Monaco, and the freedom was incredible. But also looking back, that I was comfortable enough to live by myself. Of course, I was surrounded by management and coaches, but at the end of the day, I went alone into my flat, or most days. But still, it was my responsibility. You know, the electricity works, and the lights out, and the food's in the fridge and everything. So it was quite a responsibility for a 16-year-old or 17-year-old. But somehow I managed. I guess my love for the sport was so big, and I was surrounded again by, of course, my parents came by and my older sister, but they weren't there every week. So it was quite a bold decision.
So then, by the time you were 22, say, you'd already won Wimbledon a number of times and you'd been world #1, but that's still an incredibly young age. What then kept you motivated since that? Or did you find that your motivation and dedication dropped off once you'd achieved what you'd achieved? Where do you go from winning Wimbledon at 17? Yeah, you can do it again at 18. But then you do it a second time, you're still young as at 18, reached #1 at 21, won one other Grand Slams in the meantime, and it was only 21. So it was a question, a problem to come up every year with the same drive, the same inspiration, the same hunger to win titles, because I already won so much. And yeah, I think ultimately why I kept on playing until I was 32 is I love the sport. I love the competition. I love the lifestyle. I love my fellow tennis players, as long as they lost against me. And it was a wonderful time to see different countries, different cities, meet different people. It was just an amazing lifestyle, and I didn't have to ask anybody for permission. In tennis, you don't work for a company. You're your own company. That takes a lot of discipline, because nobody can force you to go to practice or can force you to play a tournament. But then, if you have the discipline, if you have the desire, I mean, it's a great sport to be in, because you don't have a boss either. So then when during your career did you start to look to your post-professional age?
I'd say in my mid-20s, I felt like tennis was wasn't giving me enough. I felt that with all respect to other sportsmen and women, I felt my intellectual capabilities weren't used enough. So I was looking outside a little bit. I started early on a sports management company. Started in journalism, started writing stories. Also liked journalism as such that later on I became an interviewee, meaning I would sit there and there would be a professional man or woman here, and I would ask them the questions because once I see there's a camera here with the red light. Once the red light is on, I'm comfortable. Don't see me in the morning, because I'm not so comfortable in the morning, but when the red light's on, I'm good to go. And again, that's I find a lot of sportsmen and women underestimate that. Part of being a successful athlete or performer is how to deal with the media. It's important. You want to look good in the paper the next day. You want them to write a nice story or have a nice repertoire. So you have to give them their 5 minutes or 10 minutes extra. I find the world champion this is Roger Federer. I mean, I don't know any athlete who's better with the media than Roger. And he does it in 4 or 5 languages. He doesn't just speak in Swiss or in English. I mean, he speaks French and Italian and, coming from Switzerland. So, and that's one of the reasons he's the most popular athlete in the world today. Is because he gives the media sometimes what they need.
Then was it hard transitioning to a life where you didn't have to get up with that schedule of training, competing?
Of course. At first, I didn't want to get up. I was getting up all my life at early hours and just try to be better. So, and also for a human being to be called old at 35 is hard. In any other profession, in your mid-30s, you're just starting to make it. You're starting to make your first money. You get your first flat or first house, and in sports, you're called old. So as a man, you take hit on your confidence of why you call old, why you have to answer your question, well, what you're going to do. Well, I've been working already for 20 years. What have you done so far, right? But again, you have to find your serve, you have to find your footing. You know, life is awfully long. So you have to find something that gives you reasons enough to get up in the morning and go to the office and you know, meet people. And that's not easy to find once you've been in one job at the very top.
So what did you miss most once you left professional tennis?
What I missed most was the knowledge that at first I wouldn't be anywhere close to as good as I was in tennis. There was a hard reality, and secondly, there's nothing wrong with it. You know, to start again in different fields, and to find the motivation and to find the reasons for starting over again. I think that's the most difficult thing for me and most other athletes.
Are you still in that kind of mindset? Is there still new avenues that you want to pursue? Is there new things you want to move into? And is it just commentary, or where else do you see yourself?
I'm professionally, I think I found my footing a while ago. You know, tennis is a good business, not only as a player, but also as a manager, as an agent, as an expert, as a television pundit. So I was able to you know, there are thousands of tennis players who look for a job after their career, even though they were successful tennis players. So for me to have done a Wimbledon final as a German, and I do have an accent, I know, to have done the Wimbledon final the last 15 years is an honor. But it's not because I won at 17, it's not because I have blue eyes, but because some people call me funny, some people call me direct, some people just call me, you know, I speak about things the way they happened and not the way they were supposed to happen. And you know, done it 15 years for the BBC. I have my own television show in Germany, presenting all the other majors. And again, I've had a number of television series where I was the interviewee, you know, would host evenings. So television is a comfort zone by now. But of course, you want out into other businesses, and you venture out, and you know, there's many business models you want to try and see. The biggest difference, though, in my second career is, and again, tennis is an individual sport, is in any other field but tennis, literally, you need a team. And without a team, you're nothing, and you're only as good as your weakest link in the team. And that's university, and that's business life, and that's family life. But when you're an individual tennis player, you just literally need a tennis racket, a center court, if you can make it on it, and a couple of tennis balls. That's all you need. You know, tennis is not against the clock. You know, I don't need to give the ball to the striker to score. I play defense, I play offense, I serve the ace, I serve the double fault. It's totally, I'm totally responsible for my own luck. And that's incredible, powerful, yet risky if you don't make it. So that's mentally, that's the biggest change to in anything else you want to do after, because you need your family, you need your team, you need people, and only once you work as a team successfully, everybody will win.
Did you find it hard transitioning to that collegiate headspace?
Very hard, mentally, because it's you know, I'm a perfectionist, and I expect you to be everybody else that wants to work with me, as driven and as clear as I'd like to be. And obviously nobody is the same. We're all different, but you know, nobody's wrong and everybody's right. So you have to find a way of communicating and of expressing exactly what you want done, what's the goal, and how much time we have for it.
So if you could jump back into professional tennis right now, who would you most like to play against?
Well, the top guys. I mean, of course, I'd love to play Federer on the grass. I wouldn't want to play Nadal on clay, I'll tell you that. I know he's better, right? But with everybody else, you know, my strong surface was grass and was the hard courts, and of course I'd like to play Djokovic and like these guys. And again, in sport sometimes, the youth is wasted on the young. They don't know how good they have it. They don't know the possibilities they have. They're wasting their talent for years, and only when they're in their late 20s, early 30s, or when they have an injury, they understand how many years they've wasted. Now, you know, I'm 51 now. Obviously, I had my periods at 23, 24. I wasn't sure what I was doing, you know. How stupid am I? Now I know. Back then, I had no clue.
So then, with Djokovic, what was different in terms of experience from you playing in Grand Slams to coaching in Grand Slams?
I wouldn't have been a coach, would not have been a good coach in my 20s or early 30s because I was an individual. Only when you mature a little bit, you understand what I just said, is that, with coaching Djokovic, it was all about how can I make him understand to be better. And it's difficult because he was already number 2 in the world. So, the margins are small. More importantly is that you have to work in detail, and you have to convince a superstar that he's actually wrong. Well, it's impossible. But thankfully, to science and internet and ways to prove himself that, when your serve comes only at 35% is bad, even though you think it was a good serving day. I can prove you scientifically 35% isn't good enough. You have to reach at least 60. Or his problem, a big problem then was he reached a lot of Grand Slam semifinals and finals, but he would need always 3-4 hours every round to beat the opponent. So he was wasting a lot of energy. So I was trying to teach him how to win quicker. Now, I'm not going to be too strategically, but he always stood very far behind the baseline 3-4 hours because physically he was just a beast, right? He could run everybody down, but it took you 4 or 5 hours. But by the time you get to the semifinal of the second week, even Djokovic gets tired. So I was trying to improve his positioning closer to the line, finish the points quicker, therefore win quicker. No, that's not easy to do because you have to practice it, and then you have to try that in smaller tournaments. And of course, he would lose sometimes. And then with an athlete, if they win, they're the greatest. If they lose, it's your fault. So you have to take that, with a bit of salt. But ultimately, because he wanted not to win the next tournament, he wanted to be part of tennis history. He's attacking Federer's record. He was attacking Nadal's record. So these players were his opponents, and they kept winning, improving their game. So he understood that also him, as good he was, he still had a couple of weaknesses. And I was honest enough to tell him sometimes the truth. Now, it's another problem because all these superstars, they hear all day long exactly what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. Now, it can cost your job too, right? So you have to be very sensitive about when you tell these guys something, how you tell it, and then how you sugarcoat it with something that was good. I became a diplomat then. Yeah.
So you say you focused a lot on increasing or decreasing the game time with Djokovic, but your match against McEnroe in '87 was one of the longest in history, over 6 hours long. Tell us about that game. What kept you going for the 6 hours?
If you would start a match thinking it would last, it was actually 6 hours and a half, it would last that long, you wouldn't even start the match, right? I mean, you're crazy. But again, it was for my country, I'm German, and it was played in America against, in those days, a very loud and abusive New Yorker called John McEnroe. Now, everybody has a different personality, but if somebody insults me, I get better, right? If somebody kicks my leg, I want to kick him back. And he's intimidating, and we played in front of 17,000 crazy American fans and just applauding every double fault I do, and the more I want to ace them, right? Just to show them that I'm not intimidated. So I think that was the reason why he pushed me, I pushed him, he didn't want to lose, I didn't want to lose. So we ended up playing for 6.5 hours. I won at the end, I just want to make sure. I beat him at the end. But yeah, it was one of the, at the time, it was the longest match of all time. And nowadays we're friends. We are on the same television network, and we interview each other, and we talk about current players. And he's still, to people who don't know him, he's still a bit loud and a bit, not super disciplined, but he's a very cool guy. He's a loving family man and a father. But that's the other side of him. But obviously when we're players, you're younger, you don't see that. So that's the reason we pushed each other, because nobody wanted to lose.
And then as the record for the longest game has increased and increased slowly, do you think now's the point for the rules of the game to change so that games can't keep hitting or go to 7 hours or 7.5 hours?
Well, there weren't many longer than 6, but there was a match 3 or 4 years ago at Wimbledon with an American called John Isner and a French player called Nicolas Mahut, and they played for 12.5 hours. I mean, can you believe that? So thankfully, I didn't have to commentate that match. Imagine the commentators. So So I remember though, there were a couple of friends of mine, and they start the match on the Tuesday. And in those days, there was no tiebreaker in the fifth set, and they played on an outside court, so they couldn't play under the roof. So they started on a Tuesday, then the Wednesday, then the Thursday. They played until Friday, because who would have thought that the fifth set would be 68-66, where normally you can finish at 6-3, and especially on grass, it goes quick. So the fifth set alone took 5 hours. Who plays 5 hours for a set? Nobody. So thankfully, they changed the rules, even at Wimbledon, right? There's a final fifth set tiebreaker, now at 12-all. There was a long semi-final last year, whoever watched Wimbledon, between Anderson and Isner again. And the reason Isner is always involved, because he has one of the biggest serves in the game, meaning you can't break him. So he always goes to the tiebreak. And if there's no ending in the fifth set, who knows where is he going to go? So they played a 26-24 fifth set. Guess who commentated that match? Me. I didn't know what to say anymore. Ace, double fault, ace. I kept quiet. They called me from the earpiece. Boris, you still up? Yeah, but it's ace, 30-15. There was nothing you could say. But thankfully, they finished eventually. And then afterwards, it was Djokovic-Nadal, which was, I call it, the best match of last year. And they also played 5 sets. But because the first match was so long, they had to finish the fifth set on the Saturday, just before the women's final. Also, that hasn't happened. So, again, Wimbledon always brings the best of everybody.
So then, from your professional career, what was your favourite match, or what was the highlight from one of your matches?
I kind of liked the McEnroe match. That was a pretty good match to win. And because also Germany ended up beating America for the first time in America, so they had to go to second division, and we stayed in the world group. But I guess, you know, the Wimbledon finals, I played in 7. They were all special because, you know, as a tennis player, Wimbledon is we call it the big daddy of them all. That's the one you wanna win. I wish I would have won all 7 finals. I didn't. But just they were always special because I, you know, considered that my home in a way. But you know, we all like to be the best in what we do, and you know, in most professions you don't have a ranking. You don't know who's better. I mean, you know, some people have a bigger bank account, so you call them better, but that's not necessarily true. But in tennis, there's a ranking. There's a system, and the ranking comes every morning, every Monday morning at 10 o'clock, and it's sort of our Bible, or our first thing to look at on the Monday, and there tells you you're 5, you're 10, you're 500, you're 1,000. And to be ranked there 1 is something I will not forget. It's, you know, there wasn't an opinion. It isn't a moment. It's the official world ranking, and so I would say that was my biggest achievement, because it's not just a match and not just a tournament. So over a whole year, in average, you have to be better than everybody else. So that was the one I appreciate the most. Yeah.
And then my final question before we throw it open to the floor is, how would you explain, or why do you have such a preference for grass instead of clay?
Well, why I'm so fascinated with Wimbledon is because, you know, back in the day in Germany, they televised only 1 tennis tournament. That was Wimbledon. And in the late 70s, when young Boris was allowed to watch, there was one guy from Sweden. You may remember him. He's called Bjorn Borg. They kept on winning, so Borg was my favorite tennis player. And I said, one day I want to play at Wimbledon, and Wimbledon happens to be played on grass. And I think that's where my fascination started for Wimbledon, for grass, and just the dream and the imagination that one day I want to be successful there. So that's where it started.
Right. So if we'll throw it open to the audience. So if you want to put your hands up and wait for the microphone to come over to you, and when it does, please stand up. Yeah, let's go to the hand in the very back to start with.
Hi, thank you for your talk. When I was watching some press releases for the World Tour in December, so the World Tour finals, I was really struck by the fact that Djokovic was one of the smallest people in that photo, and he's 6'3".
Yeah.
So tennis is really definitely becoming a really tall man's game, 6'6", 6'7". People like Tomic, Isner, Anderson, what have you. Do you think that's the future of tennis, is going to be really short points, 6'8", 6'9", really massive people? And do you think that's just going to keep going, kind of a bit more like basketball?
Yeah, I think good observation. I think that's the way the world works. You know, we all get a bit taller nowadays than 10, 20, 30 years ago. We live longer, we get taller. You know, there are a lot of reasons for it. But in sports in particular, used to be called tall at 6'3", and you know, before various surgeries, I was actually 6'3". I shrunk a little, and I was one of the tallest guys in the locker room. You know, hence my serve was pretty good. Nowadays, I would be average, and it's fascinating for me that you know you're 6'6", and you're still agile. You still are flexible. You can move on the court like a smaller person, and I think that's just the sign of the times. I think you see it in football. I think you particularly see it in tennis. But I think you see it in all walks of life that younger generation, they get taller, yet it doesn't stop them to be supple and to be loose and to do all the things pretending they were shorter. And it's just sooner or later, not this year, but maybe in 5 years, they have to think of the height of the net, maybe, because when you're taller, your angle of serving is a lot easier, therefore you can serve easier than ace. And maybe the size of the court, because when you're longer, you have longer arms, longer legs, it's easier to cover a court. I don't know. But it was striking for me as well at the ATP final that everybody is so goddamn tall. It was unbelievable, yeah.
Let's jump to another question. Yeah, if you want to just jump across the aisle to the hand there.
Hi. What was your relationship with players like McEnroe, Agassi, Sampras? Was it friendly or competitive?
Well, the McEnroe bit you got, right? So the McEnroe part of relation, no. To be, and it's a complete normal reason. Obviously, we're competitors, right? He wants something that I want, and I want something that he wants to take away from me. So, of course, we are cordial, and we are somewhat respecting one another to a point, but it's a man-to-man competition. I only have to beat you. I don't have to beat your teammate. So naturally, I would do anything possible within the books, and sometimes not within, to intimidate you, to frighten you, to bother you, of course. And they would do the same to me. Now, afterwards, we would not talk about it because it was part of the game, and then he's allowed to do what he's allowed to do, and I do what I do. But interesting how we developed later. Now with Sampras, we befriended each other. My toughest rival was a player from Sweden called Stefan Edberg. The difficult thing with him was he was just always a nice guy. So it's very difficult to get your psyche up against a really nice guy. So it was always difficult to bother him because I liked him. And we're obviously friends now. Agassi is a different story because I don't know whether you read his book. He came a couple of years ago out with his autobiography, Open, where he was very open about how he felt about tennis and the tennis community, which wasn't always nice. So from all the guys mentioned, I think he has the least friends in tennis today. Maybe he doesn't care. Fine, he has a good life in Vegas with an amazing wife from Germany, Steffi Graf. So at least he has a good taste in women. But it's there's competition, and it's natural that you can't be best friend. And it's interesting to see a Djokovic Nadal final, and they played 57 times against each other. There are no secrets, right? They know each other exactly when one plays the forehand cross, the other one already runs because he knows it's coming cross, and vice versa, or Federer, Nadal. So I think among these guys, certainly incredible amount of respect. I don't think friendship, but I think more than what we had, because they play for so long, so many times, in so many major finals, it stuck with you. Once you're in a Grand Slam final, it's a particular moment in your life, in your parents' life, in your kids' life, and having played the same guy for 15, 20 times, it becomes part of the special moment. So for me, the best Wimbledon final ever was Nadal, Federer, I think it was 2012, 2013, when they played just before it got too dark. I mean, that match will stand forever. So naturally, I think Nadal and Federer, I think you can call them friends, even though they're still playing. But the rest of the players, I wasn't so sure.
Let's take another question. Yeah, let's jump down to the hand. You, sir.
Let's come a little
Hi,
closer.
thanks for your talk, really interesting. So your career spanned like a good 20-ish year period, and it was quite a significant period in the history of tennis in terms of how the game was played, because you saw the transition from the kind of small wooden-headed rackets to the new modern implements that are now used as part of the game. To what extent did that influence your training, your performance, and the difficulty of adapting and playing against other players who'd been raised with these modern rackets? How did that influence the rivalries and the level of kind of the intensity of the matches? As
yeah. Well, when I started playing, I had a wooden racket and a small face. If I show this, excuse me, if I show this to young players today, they think it's ancient. They think it was played in the 1800s. And I tell them that's how I played with, and they can't believe it. So technology has developed so fast, it's incredible. And partly the reason these guys play so powerful today is not because they're stronger than we were, but the quality of rackets have improved so much, the strings, including their shoes. You know, they have much better shoes than we used to have, so they can, you know, nowadays they slide a lot on the hard courts. I mean, back in the day, we would break our ankles every week. You do that because you couldn't slide. So the quality of tennis gets better. The power is much higher than it used to be. Now, everybody has the same. So you couldn't say because of that the competition is better. Because ultimately, what makes my sport always special is the rivalries. You know, even though we've seen them 57 times, we're still going to watch them for the 58th time play. And because there's so much more to that. You know, the most difficult thing in any sport is if there's a new #1 every year, or it changes even within the year, because you're getting used to one, you start liking it or not liking it, and there's another one. And the fact that you know, Federer, Djokovic, Nadal are so good for so long was great for our sport. I worry a little bit about the next generation, because they have to take over a slack which is impossible to take over, because they all will win their very first one. Federer has 20, Djokovic won his 15th. So, and the very first one will be celebrated by the second one. We go, it's a long way to reach Federer, right? So we're not giving them credit a little bit and time to develop into great players. The same thing with the qualities. My professional career spanned for 16 years, right? Which for an athlete is double than the expectancy. For every athlete, if you make 8 to 10 years, you have a successful long career. But because I started early, I finished earlier. Nowadays they go, why did you stop at 31, 32? Because I had enough, I was old, everything was hurting. Also, I was playing then already against the next generations. In my case, it was Sampras and Agassi. They were more powerful than me. When I had my best day in Wimbledon, I would play Pete Sampras. He beat me. I go, I don't like that. He serves better than me, he's quicker than me. Why? All the other guys I was able to play. Again, it's the reason why you know, players then retire, because semi-final wasn't good enough. That's the question Federer has to ask himself this year. I mean, I don't know how he does it. He's 38 in the summer. He's still very competitive. But lately, let's say the last 12 months in Grand Slams, he's not reaching the final. He's not reaching the semi-final. And that must be his goal. Because he's won 99 tournaments. He's going to win the 100th this year. But he wants to win Wimbledon. He wants to win the Australian Open. If he doesn't succeed on that level anymore, and he has changed the racket. He's a much more powerful racket than 10 years ago. So he has adapted his style a little bit, but sooner or later, you know, sport stands still for no man. Eventually you're a bit too slow, you're too old, you recover too slowly, and then it's time to go. But you know, he really pushed the envelope more than anybody else. You decide. You decide.
Well, yeah, we'll go to the hand just past. Yeah, just too long.
Hey,
Yes.
So over the last 10 years, you touched on it a bit there, there's been such a dominance between mainly the three big men in the sport. How special in the grand terms of things do you think that actually is? Are we likely to ever see it again? And if so, how are the next generation going to compare?
And not only because we are in the UK, but I really want to include Andy Murray in that group. Because to win any Grand Slam amongst the three you mentioned is unique, and very few have done in the last 12 or 13 years. He's won 3. He's won 2 Olympic golds. He won the Davis Cup. So they always call it the Big Four for a reason. He had hip surgery now, and hopefully we're going to see him at Wimbledon this summer, but obviously his career is coming to an end. You're asking for the next generation.
Yeah. Do you think we're ever going to come close to something like this game, and how's it going to
we can't imagine today that there is life after Federer. But guess what? There is. When Bjorn Borg stopped in 1980, at the tender age of 25, the whole tennis world was in mourning because there's nobody else like Bjorn Borg. And a couple of years later, there was another player. Just time doesn't stand still. And what we think today is the best, in 5 years, the latest 5 years, somebody will outdo that. And the same is in tennis. But it's a difficult torch because I'm with you. This last 12 to 14, 15 years have been exceptionally good. Tennis today is one of the most popular sports in the world. Yes, football. Okay, I agree. But then many other sports are played on all continents. Tennis is played in Australia, in South America, in Africa, in every continent, almost every country. And you need great role models. Now, it's impossible not to like Federer. It's impossible. It's impossible not to like Nadal. Because they look different, they have great personalities, they're friendly, they're good with their fans, they take time with the media. Players like before weren't like that. They were good and successful, but they weren't as popular because of the attitude. So to replace Federer and Nadal is probably impossible. But there will be another rivalry, and there will be fascinating players, of course. But this is a good group.
Then let's jump to the hand over here.
Yeah. You're not a student anymore, I assume. No. Okay, no. Just checking. Just maybe I missed something. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Boris, 2 questions.
Yes.
You know Djokovic very well. In your opinion, do you think he will catch Federer for Grand Slams? And second, Andy Murray's had his hip done. You know a bit about that. Do you think he could get back to, pretty close to the top before he finishes?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, I think Djokovic has the potential to reach 20. He's 31. He's fit again. He had a difficult last year, but he recovered. He's on the verge of winning a Grand Slam, meaning 4 majors in a row. He's done that already before when I was coaching him, but that hasn't been done in 40 years in tennis. So he's again at his very best. But in a way, he's always complaining a little bit. Why is he never that respected and that liked as Federer and Nadal? And I just gave you reasons why. And again, he's in a difficult position because people don't appreciate whether he's winning. The question is, can you catch Federer? Again, he's losing out. You cannot just say, wow, he's unbelievable, he's #1 in the world, and he won Wimbledon, US Open, Australian Open, back to back to back. No, the question is, will he catch Federer? I mean, he has enough of this guy by now, right? But that's the legacy he carries. He has a great life. He's a fantastic guy. He'd come in here, talk to you. He is so funny, and he's humble. I mean, you become a bigger fan than from the other guys. But obviously, he doesn't come across sometimes like that because of the style he plays and the hustle and the bustle and what he does. And he's also from Serbia. He's not from Switzerland or Spain. So, but yes, he can if he stays motivated. If his family continues to work as a team, because that's what they do now. Murray worries me a little bit because he did have surgery, as he posted last week. So my question is, what has he done 18 months? I mean, I commentated his last match at Wimbledon against Sam Querrey. He lost in the quarterfinal, and he couldn't, I mean, he was playing on one leg. And then it was clear he needs to fix his hip. Now, I mean, he went from A to Z. He did all the rehabbing. He went to Philadelphia. He saw all the experts, but apparently he hasn't done a surgery. Now, a hip surgery nowadays is unfortunately common in sport. I've had 2, thankfully, after my career. That's why I'm shorter now than I used to be. I used to be unbelievable tall, now I'm 5. It takes, again, 3, 4, 5 months of recovery. Now, I'm not a doctor. I don't know exactly what type of surgery, if it was a resurfacing, he said that, or was it a replacement, and was a bit of both. I mean, obviously, only the doctor, and he knows, and it's his business, it's his hip. But with his style he was never a player that would serve you out of the court. He would never a player that would win quickly. His biggest asset was always his pair of legs. And his will to win, and his determination, and his hustle, and he was just the biggest fighter out there. You got to move. You got to move 3, 4, 5 hours if necessary. And now with a fixed hip, I'm not sure whether that's possible. And I've seen his press conference in Melbourne, and he's the most popular guy in the locker room. He's really charming. The tennis players, on both sides like him a lot. And he's obviously under a lot of pain, and for him to go through that procedure took a lot of courage. So I just hope, from a sportsman point of view, you don't want to stop with an injury after you won so much. You want to stop on your own terms, ideally at your most important tournament, which I think is Wimbledon. So fingers crossed we see him in June on grass, and fingers crossed he'll be fine, because that would be sort of a fairy tale ending to his career. He would deserve that.
Yeah, let's jump to the hand straight next.
So I was wondering, by the age of 22, you were like in the top of the world, I guess, and I was.
Hold on. Number 1. Thank you. Start again. Start again.
And then I was actually wondering, like, what was like the worst moment in your career? Was like the worst crisis you had, and how did you recover?
Yeah, you asked me that question with motivation. Now, at 17, I won a lot. At 18, I won even more. And at 19, I lost in the second round of Wimbledon. And I remember going to the press room, and then before you sit in the locker room, and then your coach comes and the players, and they all go, "What happened? What went wrong?" And I'm thinking, 19, yeah, I lost a tennis match. I mean, fine, it's bad, but I'm okay. I lost a tennis match. So these quotes then in the media afterwards, they were grown as the remarks of the year from a sportsman, is to put everything in perspective of how important is a tennis match. Now, believe me, I hate losing, but sometimes you have to go back to basics and think, okay, in considering all the other things that are going on in everybody's life, and professionally and privately, it's a game of tennis. And yes, usually the better man wins or woman wins, but sometimes they don't. End of story. Right? There isn't any more to it. But when you're younger, of course you're influenced by others and the media, even then. And you question yourself, what was wrong? Oh God. So you start to lose a bit of confidence and a bit of self-belief of thinking why they're making such a big deal out of it. Only in a quiet moment. And thankfully I had a good set of parents and sister that always made sure that I'm not losing the ground, that I'm always the younger brother and the son and all that, even now. It's important because when you're in the middle of the light and you go from one highlight to another, you lose touch with base, and then you overdo a win or a loss, and that's always bad, right? You have to try to put it in perspective. Also, a lot of people ask me, pressure. How can you cope with pressure? Well, what is pressure? Pressure is not an illness, right? It's not. You don't all of a sudden get the flu, but you don't get the pressure. Is how to deal with other expectations because we know how good we are. Every morning we know it's a tough morning, it's a good morning, and then we're prepared for studies for an exam or a tennis match, or we're not prepared. We don't need to tell others we're not prepared. I know I'm not prepared. Or I am good. And then pressure is only what others make of you. It's so irrelevant. It's so not real. And once you realize that, there's no pressure. You know, because the second serve on break point is you've done that 10,000 times, you're going to do it again. It doesn't matter to score because you know where you're good at. So pressure only affects people I find that are not prepared. Pressure affects only people that have not enough confidence in their own belief. And yeah, it's, you toy with it. I mean, we all follow football, I hope. And I'm not asking to sides. You can see pressure with the Liverpool players now. It's completely irrelevant because they go out there, they play 90 minutes, and the expectation before and after has no effect how they play on the field. Yes, you can see it in every player's face. They feel the pressure. What pressure? That's the thing.
Yeah, but let's jump to the hand on the front row over here.
Hi. So obviously being the youngest winner of Wimbledon and world #1, you of course had a lot of fans. Did you have any weird or funny fan encounters throughout your career?
Of course, and some of them I can't share with you, right? But yeah, there's groupies in sports, there are groupies in tennis, and most of it I don't remember, of course. Yeah, it's a weird world. You know, you get famous, and then people think they know you because they see you on television, or they become a fan and they like what you do, and then you meet them randomly for the first time, and they tell you your life story, and you go, I know, but you've done this, and you go, I know. It was me, right? Not you know, and it's a weird thing because you want your fans to follow you, you want them to support you, and to clap when you play well and everything, and the tennis court is a bit like a theater, where you want the 15,000 at Wimbledon Center Court to root for you, not against you. It makes a difference. So you have to cater to them, and you have to be nice and do all the right things and sign the autographs. Some people want more. And so it's your judgment, but it's a difficult one because it's when you follow a superstar through media on a court, it's really not real, right? It's not a reality. It's a make believe, but you're living with each other. We live in society, so you have to just relax a little bit sometimes and treat them nice. But there's a limit. There's a limit when they can't cross. Even though they think they know you for a long time, and they think they love you, and they think they want to have a baby, you have to stop, right? You have to stop. And maybe just to finish, because maybe you have the same question, is I don't envy the superstars in sports and in entertainment today. I mean, in the world of iPhone and internet, it's an impossibility to have any sort of privacy when you're out and about. It's impossible. Therefore, 70s and 80s, the 90s, if there was an internet then, God knows what would have happened. I mean, it's not easy nowadays to be a superstar because you have to be so super careful in what you say, do, act, look like, because somebody takes a picture, or they Photoshop it a little bit, or they put it into the wrong media, you have a problem. So, yeah.
Thanks for your talk. Really interesting.
I hope so.
Yeah. Quick question regarding having coached Novak Djokovic for a few years. Touch about how important the mental aspect of the game is, and how big of a part was that for you with Novak? Because he seems like a player who's maybe more affected by sort of his state of mind than maybe other players, which really affects his performances. And secondly, is his final in Melbourne the best you've ever seen him play last month?
A player's mentality is always a problem. When they're at their best, they're at their strongest, but they're very sensitive to random things. You can't even imagine what they're sensitive to. And they're like extremely high-powered fighter jets. You have to tune here and there. That has often nothing to do with the backhand cross. Nothing. It has to do with how does he get up? What does he read first? How was his first phone call with his wife? Is his son ill? That is often a question of how he's going to feel on a practice court and therefore in a match. So my first call in the morning was always, if she wasn't with him, to his wife. How did he sleep? Not that I want to know any secret, but it's was it a comfortable night? Because that affects the training the next day, right? And then obviously, you know, over years, then you trust each other, and then he would be able to tell me, listen, you know, he used to call me boss. Boss, I need to talk to you. I said, yes, feel free, because I need to know how you feel in order for me to organize the right practice. Because if you have a problem with the knee or with your brother or with God knows who else, is of course your concentration is not there, and therefore practice is no good. So that was the key to get him to trust me, to understand that only as a unit we can help each other. And trust him enough that also I knew a thing or two about tennis, but otherwise he wouldn't have called me. But it's really on a personal level. You know, it's a one-to-one situation. It's just one guy, and that's why coaching is so much fun. But it's so demanding and time-consuming because you're on 24/7 hold. I mean, I had phone calls from him at 11 o'clock at night. I'm not going to tell you where it was. We're saying, I can't play tomorrow. What? It's 11 o'clock, you play tomorrow at 2 o'clock. No, boss, I can't. I'm nervous, I'm afraid. I said, what? So I would go over to his house. We have a sit down until 1:30 in the morning. Hopefully he sleeps well, hopefully he comes out. Like that. So backhand slice was the easy bit. It was him trusting me with his inner feelings and me finding a language and a way to comfort him and make sure that he's all right. Because sometimes he's not all right. And sometimes you shouldn't play. But obviously, you know, 10,000 people later, and TV stations and sponsorship money, you got to go out there sometimes, even though you're not feeling your best. It's just part of the job. You know.
So I think we've got time for one final question. So let's jump to the hand in the very back.
Make it a good one. No pressure.
Given what you've said about the way the game's gone and is going, do you think we'll ever see someone break through so young as you did and have the sort of first year that you did, where winning Wimbledon and so soon, or is that you're going to keep that record forever?
I hope so. I hope so. It gives me a reason to come back in 10 years and talk to you guys. Look, every record is there to be broken. You know, there isn't a record in the world you know, that sooner or later will be broken. Mine is still standing, and is standing strong, because there isn't a 17-year-old around or 16-year-old that will come. But we talked before about the physical abilities of the younger generation. You know, they're at 15, 16, much bigger, much taller, much stronger than we were. So they'll be eventually in a position to win a lot of tennis matches when they're 17. Now, thankfully in tennis, you not only win when you're physically better, but when you're mentally better and you can think strategic. I find with the younger generation is that they may look mature, but they're not. You know, I have children that are, you know, 18 and 19, even a bit older, and you know, they can tell you everything about, you know, science and math and internet and technology, but when I talk to them about their feelings, their emotions, they began to stutter. I said, son, talk to me very quietly. The phone, no, we turn the phone off, we turn the TV off, the internet off, just give me 10 minutes of your soul. They don't know what to do with it. And I think that's one of the reasons why in sports, maybe in society, but in sports, you won't have that many young achievers, because there comes a moment when you look yourself in the mirror, you have to face your inner demons, you have to be honest with yourself, and then you get overcome by emotions and you don't know how to deal with them. And it's works in my favor, because maybe next year nobody wins at 17, but sooner or later, you know, coming back to the first part, I mean, you know, who would have thought that there's a 100-meter runner from Jamaica who's 6'5" or 6", Usain Bolt is really tall, too tall for 100 meters, would run the 100 meters in 9.58 seconds. It used to be the 10-second mark was impossible to break, right? This guy is so much faster. And he keeps on winning over 12 years. Freak of nature or sign of the time. It is what it is. And so sooner or later, you know, I hate to admit it, but there will be a 17-year-old, maybe 2 days younger than me, will win Wimbledon, and I'll be upset on that very night, for sure. Okay.
Well, what a wonderful way.
See? Is that an omen?
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to join with me in thanking Boris Becker.